Welcome to Middlesex Community College. We have a beautiful day outside, so it's always nice to be on our campus on such a lovely day. I'm Dr. Stephen Minkler, Dean of Academic Affairs and Administrator in charge here at Middlesex. And welcome to today's Town Hall meeting with Mr. Mark Ojakian, President of the Connecticut State College and University System. Greetings to you, Mark, and members of your staff who are joining us this morning. With us today in the audience are faculty, staff, and students from Middlesex Community College, members of the MXCC Regional Advisory Council, MXCC Foundation, and the MXCC Corporators, friends from Wesleyan University with whom we partner on a number of academic initiatives, our state legislators and elected officials from the cities of Middletown and Meriden, representatives from the two school systems in those two cities, and our partners in education from the communities we serve, representing dozens of businesses, social service agencies, and healthcare providers, large and small. Thank you all for making the time to be with us this morning. Before we continue, let me go over the logistics for today's event. So first, I'll give brief welcoming remarks from the college. Second, you, the audience, will have the opportunity to ask President Ojakian questions. And when we do that, we ask that you please line up at the two microphones that are on the two aisles on either side of me. And we ask that you keep your questions brief so that we can get as many questions in as possible in the limited time we have, and maybe use the note cards that we gave you on the way in. And I will alternate between the two sides of the audience to keep things moving along. And third, we'll leave the last few minutes for closing remarks from President Ojakian, and I've invited him to share a few things he may have learned from his visits to the CSCU campuses, maybe a few things that he didn't realize before he did this town hall tour. So okay with the logistics? Okay. So this town hall meeting is President Ojakian's final stop on a 17-campus tour of the CSCU institutions. And he's still standing. All right. And we're certain you scheduled this one on purpose because you saved Middlesex as the best for the last. So we thank you for that. Because we are last, we've been able to learn from videos from the other town halls that were happening at the other colleges and universities. And I think there's a few things we can agree to, a few topics that have already been covered in depth, and we might not need to address those again unless we need to probe a little bit deeper. So for example, we know that the state budget, according to Ben Barnes, Secretary of Office of Policy and Management, is in a period of permanent fiscal crisis. And this crisis is getting worse by the day. We know that our system is looking at a $41 million budget gap over the next 2 years, with the possibility this gap could increase to almost $100 million. On the surface, the Students First strategies are intended to fix this and create a more sustainable organization to preserve the mission of all of our colleges and universities. We know that our students, employees, and community partners did not cause the massive fiscal dilemma we are facing today, but are asked to partner in solving it. We know our students continue to pay higher tuition and fees every year, maybe not as much as neighboring states, but certainly more than New York, which just embraced free public college education. We know state employees, both union and non-union, have agreed to wage, pension, and benefit concessions twice in the last 8 years and are being asked to do so again. We know that without concessions, the strategies necessary to balance the system budget will be far more draconian. But here's what we also know. We know Middlesex Community College and our system can no longer cling to business as usual in the face of multi-billion-dollar state deficits. These deficits and the cuts to our state appropriation require us to think out of the box so that we may operate more efficiently, reduce expenses, and increase revenue. And as I'm sure you've heard, Mark, at all of the CSCU colleges and institutions, we know Middlesex has an outstanding faculty and staff who care deeply about the success of each and every student who enters our doors. We have excellent academic programs and outstanding support services. We've forged deep and abiding relationships within the communities we serve. We're able to do this because, respectfully, Students First is not new to us. It's been in our blood since we were founded in 1966. And as we celebrate our first half century as a college, we developed a new mission statement that's on the screen behind me. And it says, "Students are at the center of Middlesex Community College. By creating meaningful relationships with our diverse population of students and by providing high-quality, affordable, and accessible educational experiences, Middlesex Community College helps students achieve their individual goals and become productive, engaged global citizens." Colleges and universities are by nature social organizations, and by that I mean we are in the business of developing trusting relationships in order to get our work done and to fulfill our mission to help students achieve their individual goals. We promise our students that we wish to form authentic professional relationships with them to ensure their success. Every semester, over 4,000 students enroll in credit and non-credit courses, certificates, and degree programs. Among them are 200 students taking dual enrollment college courses in their high school, nearly 60 incarcerated men and women enrolled in our prison education partnership, which we offer together with Wesleyan University and the State Department of Correction, and over 100 students enrolled in one of the new TAP pathway programs, ensuring seamless transfer from the community colleges to the state universities. 34% of our students are students of color, compared to only 24% 10 years ago. 37% receive Pell Grants, 49% receive some form of grant or scholarship. The Connecticut community colleges serve the highest number of students of color in the state of Connecticut, and we also serve the greatest number of students who faced the greatest economic barriers to attending, never mind completing, a college education. It's also worth noting that Middlesex's enrollment has increased nearly 30% over the past 10 years, but the number of full-time faculty and staff has not changed at all during that time. So we promise each other to form relationships on campus that support our professional development and provide programs and services demanded by our students and our community. To do so, I believe we've created a culture of innovation and creativity. We're fostering a can-do spirit among our entire team on campus. We are just the right size. We're not too big, we're not too small, to try new things and to pilot new initiatives for our students and for the CSCU system. So as a local and system resource, a few examples are on a sheet that we've handed out to all of you that were on your chairs this morning. So just to list a couple of them quickly, with your indulgence, President Ojakian. We have an innovative information technology department that's a full partner with the faculty to create teaching and learning spaces that are appropriate to the subject matter and which encourage greater use of instructional technology throughout the curriculum. Our IT department has collaborated with the faculty and our Learning Commons, which is our library, distance education, and academic success center, to create outstanding 21st century classrooms that really pave the way for what teaching and learning look like for the next 20, 30, or more years. We have a Center for New Media, which is a system resource that allows us to provide production services at a high quality to all of our institutions, as well as do work for hire, bringing in hundreds of thousands of dollars in revenue over the last few years. Our prison education partnership I mentioned earlier. We have a new partnership with the Meriden Public School Systems, in which we're moving our Meriden Center from downtown just a mile away to Platt High School, which will save the college over $500,000 a year in overhead, while also giving high school students and school employees the opportunity to take college credit classes, saving them thousands of dollars toward their college education. Our health and life science programs have unique partnerships with Piper Olson Veterinary Hospital and Middlesex Hospital, in which we're able to offer vet tech and radiology programs in facilities that this college and the state of Connecticut would not be able to afford to build on campus. Our ophthalmic design and dispensing program is the only one of its kind in the state of Connecticut and relies on donations and partnerships to run the program, but also to provide vast community service through the Community Eye Care Days. I think I could go on and on, but for the sake of time...
You can talk all you want.
I think what I'm trying to say is Middlesex embodies the vision of the 1947 Truman Commission, which laid out the vision for what community colleges ought to be, that we're primarily local or regional in scope, that we are locally controlled, that we are deliberately organized such that we fit into a statewide system of higher education, and that we're able to serve the interests of the entire state as well as our respective communities. So I'm sure today's questions will address the concerns among students, staff, and community partners as we embark on rethinking the organization of our college and our system. And that's my story, and I'm sticking to it. So I'll ask people to line up at the microphones if you have a question, but our first question will come from the podium. So President Ojakian, since your strategies were first made public a few weeks ago, the state budget deficit has grown by almost another $2 billion over the biennium. How do you think this will impact our system, and how is this making your job in implementing a students first strategy much more difficult?
Well, Steve, thank you, and good morning, everybody. It's a pleasure to be here. This is not the first time I've been to this campus. I was at this campus when I first became president. I've been back many times since, whether it's for fundraising events through the foundation or through the quiet conversations you had recently before the last election. But let me just get right to it. Since we announced the Students First strategy, the budget has in fact risen by another $2 billion deficit over the next 2 years. From the governor's proposed budget, the conversations now at the Capitol, and we have, I see Senator Suzio and Representative Lesser here who are part of those conversations. Folks are now in the process of looking at cutting another $900 million from this year's proposed budget. So when you start out with a proposed budget that cuts your system by 4.4% or $38 million, I can't imagine a scenario under which a $900 million additional cut would not have an impact on our budget. Now, the 4.4% budget was on the low end. And we were, I think, advocating that it stay at 4.4%. So imagine a scenario where you're actually saying, please only cut us 4.4%, as opposed to saying, please give us more money. Because we know if we start to talk about advocating for additional dollars, while that is something we always do and talk about investment of public higher education in our system as being an investment in the future of the state, the fiscal reality of the state is that there's not going to be additional money to give to anybody. And we're also advocating with many other constituencies up at the Capitol for a limited or a smaller pie, so to speak. People with intellectual disabilities, physical disabilities, senior citizens, single mothers, a whole host of folks that are also being cut. So it's, you go up there any day of the week and you'll see a variety of constituencies trying to make their same case. So the budget situation is not good. And as we go through this morning and we talk about some of the strategies and some of the options, the goal has always been and continues to be to try to find a long-term sustainable process for our system and for these institutions. And the goal continues to be to not close a college. That's the goal. So when we look at everything else that we have to do, the goal has always been and will continue to be to not close an institution. But I'll be very honest with you. There are conversations up at the Capitol about what would it save over a 2-year period to close 1 or 2 colleges. And those requests have come from not only the nonpartisan Office of Fiscal Analysis on behalf of legislators, but the Governor's Budget Office, talking about not only community colleges, which seem to be the easiest targets, but also what would it be if we had one less university branch, for example. So people are looking for any way that they can to balance the budget. Now, I'm not a part of the conversation, nor do I choose to be this time around, A, about CBAC, or B, around, does it make sense to have, revenue as opposed to cuts? That's for the folks on my left over here to have those conversations. But I like to use the example of how we were able together to work out a situation or a solution for the Meriden Center of this campus. And I want to thank Senator Suzio. One of the first things he did when he got elected was come to this college, meet with President Washesa and I about how he could be helpful. And putting our heads together, we knew that we could no longer afford to keep the standalone center in Meriden. It wasn't a question of did we want to or not. We could not afford to do that. So we had to look at other solutions because I did not want to be in a position of not offering the education to the students who went to the Meriden campus. So we put our collective heads together with the whole delegation, and Senator Suzio was key to that. We went forward and we talked to the mayor's office, we talked to the economic development folks, we talked to the superintendent of schools, and now we have a solution, right? So the students are not going to be disadvantaged. And how about a partnership between K through 12 and higher education for something that we should be looking to do? So, my message is simple. We have a really difficult and serious financial situation on our hands. So we can either ignore it, or we can work together to make the best of a bad situation and come up with a solution that makes the system and the institutions more financially viable. Now, the cut to Middlesex, just, I carry around with me these numbers, so I tend to remember them. On the low end is about $650,000, and on the high end, it's about $2.5 million. And that high end number was put together before the budget got another $2 billion in deficit. So $2.5 million more cut from this institution's budget. It would be very easy for me to sit back in Hartford and just pass it on and say, either to the president or now to your great leader, Steve, just cut the budget by $2.5 million. Something's got to give. Something's got to give. I know that cuts have already had to be made at this institution, which have not, been great. What would another $2.5 million this year, another $4 million, and it just keeps going and going and going. We have a structural deficit, not only in our state, but in our system. So I don't want to be the person to just sit back, pass on the cuts, work out the remaining parts of my contract and go sit on a beach chair somewhere, because I think I have a responsibility to try to do better, not only for the system, but for everybody here, but especially for the students. So happy to take more questions, but the budget is not in a good place. And just one final thing, I know over the 10 years your enrollment has increased, but 10 years ago was when unemployment was at its highest, right? And so the need for people to come back to community college, to gain new skills, to be retrained was great. But we've seen at all of our institutions as unemployment has gone down, that enrollments have gone down. And so as enrollments go down, there's less revenue coming in. As there's less revenue coming in, I think 2 of the past 4 years here, despite everyone's best efforts, there was a deficit situation in the budget. And we had to go into reserves. And the reserves are about like this. So imagine your own bank account where you have maybe less than a month's ability to pay your bills in case something were to happen. That's what we're facing. So I've been going around. This is my last stop on this tour. And I've been listening to everybody, trying to get information. I have folks that meet me here, and not because I need protection, because I do travel alone, but because I like to understand the questions people are asking. And I also, if folks want to be part of the process moving forward, we have folks here that will take your name and your email address, because we're asking everybody who wants to participate to have an opportunity as part of the planning process. So with that, I will, despite the look on your face, I'm still talking. No, can I just say what that's about? I'm sorry. So one of my favorite expressions is, what does it say? How does it start? Oh, despite the look on my face, you're still talking, right? Because I sit in meetings and I love sit there, and people just keep talking. I'm like, despite the look on my face, you're still talking. And so when I went, and I've said this periodically. So when I went to the first town hall at Tunks, this is so funny. I made that statement, and 3 days afterwards, I got a package in the mail, and now I'm having security open my packages downstairs, because you never know. And there was a coffee mug that had that expression on it today. Well, don't you know, I came in today, and your great FAC representative, Judy Wallace, presented me with a little gift from the institution with the same exact coffee mug. So the first one and the last one. And I'm going to put it right next to my other favorite saying on my desk that says, sometimes a squeaky wheel doesn't get greased, it gets replaced. Okay.
Okay, I know we're not a shy crowd, but if you have a question, please step up to one of the microphones. I'll start on my right. So Tony Majewski.
Okay, thank you for coming today. Just to draw on what you were saying about how we could not afford the Meriden Center anymore, what's the consideration of moving Capital Community College back to Woodland Street, where it was originally housed, and getting out of that lease on Main Street in Hartford? Now, that's not to eliminate the system office, but one of the advantages...
That's an interesting way of eliminating it, though. I never thought about it.
Well, we were thinking out of the box. So, one of the advantages that the old Board of Trustees had is they had their finger on the pulse when they were housed at Capitol. They were able to see students, able to ask them questions on the fly, and would that be a consideration to move system office integrated within all the campuses with the various functions, and have that room available at Woodland Street for Capital to come back in there, and that would save money on the lease on Main Street.
Well, let me just, there is no longer a lease on Main Street. Because we have looked, because that was one of the questions I asked, can we get rid of the lease and can we go somewhere else? And the state now owns that building, just like the state owns Woodland Street. So when I first came in as president, we had two buildings for the central office, 39 and 61. And it made no sense to me to have staff in two places when there was room for everybody at 61. So the state now took back 39. We're all in 61. I also don't want to leave people with the impression that we never get out and see students. One of the things that I do most is when I'm at campuses is go to meet with students. Every student event I go to that I'm invited to. So we're looking at every creative way to save money, but that would not be a savings because the state owns the building anyways, and all we pay for is some of the upkeep and the utilities expense for that building. Okay. That's a good thought. Thank you.
On my left, Donna, you can introduce yourself.
Hey, because you don't know me, my name is Donna Crum. I am the education manager at Middlesex Hospital Radiology Department, but I'm also the program director of Middlesex Community College Radiography Program. My question is, I'm sure that you're aware that we're the Center of Excellence for Diagnostic Imaging in Connecticut. We have radiology, CT, and mammography here at Middlesex Community College. How will this plan, or whatever is happening, going to affect my 13 clinical affiliates and the contracts that we have with them for our partnership in training the students? We have students in Putnam, Danbury, Shoreline, Middlesex. I mean, we affect all of those groups of people that you talked about. How is the plan in the state going to affect the radiography program?
So let me answer that in a couple ways. First of all, it won't. Secondly, it's not a plan. I should have said that at the beginning because it's two strategies that will ultimately take the shape of a plan as a team works to shape this. There's a reason we're working very closely with the accrediting bodies to make sure that any move we make forward does not negatively impact any of the programs. So we're meeting with NEASC, we're meeting with the other nationally accrediting bodies to make sure that anything we do doesn't have unintended consequences, because we want to make sure that we're able to maintain programs like the one that you oversee. So what we're looking at would not impact that at all.
Okay, thank you.
That's the goal.
Hi, I'm Chris Gargamelli. I'm the interim program coordinator for our veterinary technology program. And I'm glad we've been talking a lot about our high school programs, because one of the things we're really proud of here at Middlesex is our early college academy, which is our concurrent enrollment program here. And we actually have 5 pathways. So we have, the vet tech program, which I'm involved with. We have the accounting, our computer information technology, early childhood education, manufacturing, and new media. So we established these 5 different pathways based on kind of the local needs in the communities and what our high schools were willing to offer and partner with us. So with having those relationships locally, we've been able to determine what courses to offer and the minimum hiring qualifications for those high school instructors, because they are Middlesex instructors offering our courses in the high school. So one of the things that when I looked at the strategy, I had a question about was, we make those decisions locally based on knowing the high schools and knowing our needs and their needs. So would we maintain that flexibility of hiring and course determination here?
Yes.
Okay, great. Easy question. Thank you.
Yes.
Okay. Back to our left.
Hi, I'm Matthew Satilli. I'm a broadcast cinema student here, graduating in a couple weeks. Just really briefly, I ended up at Middlesex after attending 4 other community colleges in Connecticut over a period of 10 years. And I came here because of the Center for New Media, because of the opportunities that are allotted through that. So, and last semester I was able to work with you, Mark, recording the I Hear You video, the message to the students and staff at the beginning of the year. So what I'm wondering, sort of on behalf of the Center for New Media and the Corporate Media Center, is how you plan to strengthen the relationship between the CSCU system and our Corporate Media Center and the Center for New Media here at Middlesex.
Yeah, thank you for that question, and congratulations on graduating. I think that's awesome. As I think I said when I was there last year to do that filming, and as we've talked to folks as I've traveled, I think that program is a hidden gem, right? And I don't think we make the best use out of your center at the rest of the system. Mm-hmm. And so one of the things we've been talking about at the Council of Presidents is just that. How can we take the expertise of different institutions and leverage that expertise around 17 places? There's no reason people should either have substandard offerings like at different places, or that the product of doing filming or doing videos can't be done here. Or I know that you travel also to do it elsewhere, because I think I did something else where somebody came in my office. So no, I want to make sure that we take the great programmatic offerings we have in different places and find ways to use them across all of our institutions. Because you're right, you do a great job down there. You made me actually look good in about 2 takes. So that's what we're planning on doing.
Thank you.
Thank you, and good. So what are you doing from here?
I have an internship right now, that I did this semester with a company that does aerial videography with drones, and they're keeping me on as an employee after.
Oh, great.
So.
Congratulations. That's awesome.
Back to our right.
Hello. My name is Suzanne Wall, and it's nice to be here, President Ojakian. I'm graduating in the fall with a degree in biotechnology, and I came to Middlesex because I wanted to get some skills to get a job in a STEM field. I found at other community colleges, most of the programs were geared toward people wanting to transfer to a 4-year program, but I already have a bachelor's degree, I already have a master's degree, and my experience at Middlesex I've found that the faculty have really listened to my needs, and I'm worried that that may get lost in a consolidated system.
Well, that's not the point or the goal of doing that. As a matter of fact, I think the program area that you are currently in and are going to graduate, we just had a very nice event at Jackson Labs on Friday.
I was there.
You were there, okay.
Yes.
And that was a fabulous bringing together of employers and students
Certainly.
to talk about skills and to talk about what you might want to do, what you could do. And those are the kinds of innovative programs that we want to enhance. The point of this whole discussion is not about diminishing community college education. It's not about not recognizing the importance of an institution to a community or the unique nature of each institution. I always knew that existed since I came into the system, and this has only reinforced that feeling for me. But it's to make sure that together we can come up with a solution that makes sense for the future so that we don't have to talk about 10 community colleges in Connecticut, 9 community colleges in Connecticut. I would fully expect when, there's all these now going to be these competing budgets that are going to come out. You're going to have the governor coming out with a new budget, and the Senate the Republicans and the Democrats, everyone's going to come up with their own budget. Maybe the House and the Senate will come up with different budgets too. And I would expect in some of those budgets to see an even greater reduction with a directive to close colleges. And I'm not just making it up. And these are, I don't come from the academy, and I understand the political landscape, and I know these discussions are happening. So we're going to have to continue to fight to make sure that doesn't happen. So I want to make sure we can enhance the programs like the one that you're absolutely talking about, because that is going to lead to the jobs for the future. And I hope you had did you have good conversations?
Yes, it was a wonderful day.
Did you talk to employers?
There were employers, there were professors. I felt like I talked to everybody.
Good. So I want to make sure that folks that follow in your footsteps have the same opportunity that you've had.
And if I could make just one more point, President Ojakian.
Sure.
So, I'm a midlife career changer, and I have family responsibilities, family care, elder care, and I live in Berlin, and the convenience of being able to just come to Middletown and take a class, go home in the middle of the day, and then come back at night to take a class has been very helpful for me.
No, I totally recognize that. You're not alone. Many of the students, or most of the students who go to our community colleges have those same challenges.
Right.
They just don't come to school and go home. They have to work, they have children, they have to ride the bus. As you know, many of our community colleges now have food pantries. So, we have students, and we have to make sure that we adapt to make it easier for the students to come here, not the other way around. So thank you for that, and good luck to you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Representative.
Good morning, and welcome back to Middlesex, President Ojakian. For those of you who don't know, Representative Matt Lester. First of all, I wanted to thank you for that last point that you made, which is that the legislature has not yet adopted a deficit mitigation package or a budget, so a lot of the numbers are still uncertain, but you're absolutely right that the state's fiscal condition is pretty dire, and the numbers that just came out just emphasize the trouble that we're facing. So maybe you could talk a little bit more how this sort of plays into the current uncertainty that's there. How much are we going to be doing sooner versus wait until after a budget is passed? As you know, I introduced a bill at the beginning of the session to expand funding for community colleges and try to copy what New York State just did in making college free for middle-income families. Obviously, that is very difficult given the current environment. But I was wondering just sort of if you could walk through the timeline. Second, I think we've heard from folks already today about the special sauce that we have here at Middlesex, which is strong local partnerships in the community that I think really depend on having strong local leadership, and whether or not we could continue that in a different model for the system. How you sort of see that going forward, because I feel like we've been able to punch far above our weight here at Middlesex for many years, and that's why we have students coming here from across the state.
Well, thank you, Representative, and thank you, first of all, for your support. You have introduced legislation to enhance what we do and also to provide the dollars, you know. And I would love to be in a position to say we're going to be able to do things for free, right? But I don't right now have that luxury. So both of the strategies that you all have been made aware of, either online or through, I guess, YouTube. I guess I'm on YouTube. Go figure. I probably have like 10 hits, which I don't think is very good, but is a 2-year implementation period, because we want to do this in a very thoughtful way. And not only do we have to work with NEASC, which is the accrediting body, to make sure that we do things in the right manner, but we also you know, are having teams that are going to be working to put both strategies into place. So the goal is a 2-year implementation period. Some things may take sooner to implement than others. But make no mistake about it, as depending on what happens with the budget, you know, we're going to have to still do some very difficult things next year. I don't want to speed up the process of this integration or consolidation approach, because I think we would be doing ourselves a disservice to not do it correctly. But we are going to have some difficult decisions to make. I don't, you know, I keep telling people up at the Capitol not to, you know, look at our reserves as free money, right? There's always a tendency to say, here's a pot of money, let's take it, because our reserves are there for a reason, and our reserves are lower than what accrediting bodies would like us to have. And so the second part of the question is to try to find a model, right, that we can have a consolidation of management and leadership across 12 institutions in the state the size of Connecticut, and still retain the local connections, the strong leadership model, and the uniqueness of each institution. Now, it might look different. It might look more regional, perhaps. That's what we need to have discussions about. But as you know, just sitting back and not even having the conversation and doing nothing, I think would be disastrous, and we would actually be in a worse position because we would then be forced at some point to actually close institutions. And I don't want to be in that business right now. Thank you. Hi.
Hello, Rebecca Risbrown, Criminal Justice Program here at Middlesex Community College. So about a year and a half ago, Steve and Dean Hogan had a budget brainstorm session where we were all invited. And one of the great things that came out of that was the MAP program, the Middlesex Accelerated Program, which is a 13-month degree program that students can earn their degree online with 5-week classes. And it was a faculty-driven initiative that became a school-wide initiative. And it's an excellent example of when you ask us in time of crisis, we can come up with a plan. And the other thing with MAP is it addresses the shifting demographic to the adult learner. One of the obstacles we have, and one of the things that we'd like to see, is that MAP become the pilot for the system and make it easier for students who are at other colleges to enroll in our classes, our online classes. Currently, right now, if I have a student from, say, Capital want to come into our class, they have to sign a consortium agreement. They also have to register for Middlesex. It's a lot of paperwork. But if we're all one system, is there ways that we can just make it easier that the students can just click through banner and they're in our classes?
That actually makes a lot of sense. Did somebody write that? Okay. I have 2 folks here. Because what I'm trying to do is make things easier. Since 2011, we have not acted like a system. We haven't taken advantage of what a system is supposed to be. So we can go back and have the discussion that happened in 2011, or 6 years later we can move on, and we can try to find ways that we can use your example as a way to be more system-wide in our approaches. So no, that's definitely something that we will look at, and I think anything that would allow more students to enroll is not only good for programs and students, it's good for revenue. Thank you.
I'm Jacob Bollier, a student in the criminal justice program. Would Middlesex be at risk more than any others to close if the state decided that they needed to close some institutions?
To be perfectly honest with you, I haven't even looked at those possibilities. I don't know how one would go about doing that. I honestly don't. How do you pick, what stays and what goes? How do you understand what the impact would be on the students and where the students would then need to continue their education or not? I mean, these are not choices that one prefers to have to make, which is why, I want to make sure that we can come up with collective solutions to make the system and the institutions more sustainable into the future, but also lobby, as hard as we can to make sure that there aren't additional cuts which direct us what to do. I'm always a big believer in saying, we have difficult decisions to make, we'll take care of it. If the legislature, others want to be partners with us, we're happy to do that. But let's not just direct us what to do without understanding what the consequences would be of that. But my fear continues to be is that when you have to cut, or you're looking to cut another $900 million out of a budget that already cut 4.4% from our system, what's going to be cut? I'm working as hard as I can to make sure that we can get as close to the 4.4% cut. And I don't have a crystal ball, unless Senator Sousa, you can tell me how this is going to all work out. We're going to have to continue to fight. But I really don't want to be in a position of having to have a conversation about which institutions would need to close. Just honest.
Thank you, sir.
No, thank you.
Good morning. I'm Kevin Wilhelm, President and CEO of Middlesex United Way and the chair of the college's Regional Advisory Council. A quick comment, just my personal reflection. Clearly, the reality could be that a college could close. That would be an option on the table, I guess. But I feel like that's still kind of setting up a false choice. Given the pushback in Meriden, and I think rightly so, the backlash, I don't think any elected leaders who are, are trying to win elections, no one's going to support closing a college at this point in time in their region. It doesn't mean that people who maybe aren't elected or don't have a college in their district. So I feel like that's really, it seems to suggest to me that, oh my gosh, at least we didn't close a college, so all of my tough decisions are palatable. So I have a question, if you want to comment on that.
Yeah, can I just comment on that?
Yeah, please.
Because I would have thought the same thing, right? But as I've traveled not only around the state, but also in the legislative building in the Capitol, and I've talked to legislators, there's been some legislators on both sides of the aisle who have said, you can close the one in my district. True. I mean, it's absolutely true. And so what would happen, right? The budget might come out and say, you're going to be cut another, I don't know, $25, $50 million. You need to cut one or two institutions. They wouldn't say which ones they were, right? They would leave that to the board and to myself, right? So that's kind of an easy way of getting out of that situation. And then when push comes to shove, I'm going to be the bad guy. And nobody's going to be any of the wiser when they run for re-election. But I mean, the reason that you have some legislators here today is because they care about this institution and have worked very, very well with us to make sure we had a collective solution around Meriden. So things are so much different now, having been in that building for 37 years in one capacity or another. Things are very, very different this year. And I think, when you're looking to grab pots of money from, here and there, I would not rule that out, but I don't think anything would specify which one it would be.
Well, here's my more question. I appreciate it. Help us understand the 28 million versus 13 million disparity between the state system and the community colleges. And of course, everyone wants students first, but it does seem as if the community colleges, it's an unfair. The $28 million seems disproportionate, especially given the students that are being served here in terms of income and the most diverse students, and they're going to graduate and stay here and contribute to taxes and hopefully the betterment of the state income situation in the long run. But it seems like in the hierarchy that these are really students third. These are students last at the community college system. You've got UConn, you've got maybe the state system, and here. And so help us understand the $28 million versus $13 million decision. And then what specifically have you and the Board and Regents looked at on the revenue generation side? There have to be some ideas. I know you're seeking help from all of us about revenue generation, but how hard are you looking at that? And are there other things that can be done to sort of mitigate the cuts? There are going to be cuts, we know that. So those are my questions.
Sure, and we're working very hard on both sides, not only the expense side, but the revenue side. And having a lot of discussions on how we can, first of all, how can we keep our students in school? And so that they're able to not only graduate, but continue to provide tuition revenue. How can we make sure that many of our students go from one of our 2-year to our 4-year institutions to make sure that revenue stays into the system? How can we, one of the things I'm exploring is how can we, in certain major areas of study, have the last 2 years of a degree program offered on a community college campus by university professors, because the student is, as the young lady said earlier, it's hard enough for her to get here from Berlin. Why don't we make it easier for her to get, if she wanted to go on, to get her bachelor's degree right here? It would not only allow for a better educational opportunity for students, but it would also mean that we would get additional revenue there. So I want people to understand the numbers a little bit. And we get 3 block grants that come to us from the legislature. One's for the Connecticut State Universities, one's for the community colleges, and one's for Charter Oak. And we can't move money between those budget lines. And the community colleges get 60% of their support, financial support, from that block grant. So as you see declining block grant numbers, the amount that we can give to community colleges continues to go down. And we have many community colleges that are in a very difficult financial position. I said, 2 out of, I think, the last 4 years, Middlesex had a budget deficit. Others have had budget deficits, and there's projected budget deficits into the future. And you can close budgets, right, if you have to. But what does that mean? Does that mean the library gets closed more? Does that mean we reduce our security for our students more? I mean, there's choices you have to make when you get $2.5 million less money. So because the community colleges are in a much worse financial situation, and we get a block grant, we had to look at a different way to have the colleges managed and led. Because even if we were to take, first of all, I don't control UConn's budget. That's a whole separate, and I don't want to be in a position, first of all, pitting one against the other, right? Because we're all public higher education. So if you were to take more money, say, from the universities, you would still have the same financial situation at the colleges. That doesn't go away. There's no ability to move money within those block grants, which is why when the governor's budget first came out and there was one block grant for all 17, I thought, hey, maybe there's something here. But the legislature was quick to say that they didn't want the board or myself to have control over where the money was going, and they wanted to make sure which line it was in. So the financial situation of the colleges is much, much worse. And that's the reason that we have to find a different way to model those. Thank you. Hi.
Good morning. Cheryl Dubon-Smith, Associate Dean of Development. Thank you, Kevin, for the segue into revenue generation, because that's really where I want to ask my questions. Energy's growing here at MXCC to explore and create one or more social enterprise opportunities using the great wealth of talent we have here that will begin to build and ultimately help us become less dependent on tax dollars. So instead of talking about moving money around, we're talking about literally creating new opportunities by creating some form of business that will support what we do, right? I mean, so here's my question. Is this concept or something like it an idea that you are willing to explore? And can you envision this type of approach as something that would be created at the system-wide level to provide alternate funding opportunities?
Absolutely. I'm looking at any innovative approach that will allow us to replace state dollars with other dollars. Because this is not just this year
No.
or next year.
No.
This is into the future.
Right.
And so the budget deficit isn't only $2.2 billion for next fiscal year. The year after that, it's at least $2.7
Right.
billion.
I know it takes a while to do this, but we should probably start doing it now, even as we're doing the cost-cutting part.
Absolutely.
I mean, I was looking into Newman's Own, because that's the company that everybody knows, the social enterprise. But over $450 million has been generated for charity since their business opened. And they donated profits just in the last year to charity of $30 million. So my sense is there are so many creative people and students here that we could do that.
No.
Okay, one other question. I have seen so many hundreds of millions of dollars, federal dollars, being lost to the state of Connecticut because at a system level, we have not worked to bring those grants into Connecticut. We have had the opportunity to take advantage of a couple, and they've been amazing. It's Center for New Media, it's Health and Life Sciences. But I've watched that there's so much more money out there that we're not getting. So is your plan as part of the revenue generation to have someone very focused on this at the system level who can keep this going? Because my sense is that there isn't really anybody right now.
No, and I've made that same point over the last 18 months, is that we need to find a way to have a more coordinated approach to federal dollars and federal grants. And you're right, we worked on it with the Health and Life Sciences grant, the CAMI grant for manufacturing.
Right.
So we've taken advantage of that. And I think, as we look over how are we going to integrate, administrative functions to me is a bad word, but I don't know how else to describe those kinds of functions. But I think we do need to, have a much more coordinated and strategic approach to those federal grants. And I think you'll be seeing some of that as a part of our, process moving forward.
Thank you.
So thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Adam Laser. I'm a former student here. I just want to say thank you for coming out here and taking the time to talk to all of us, try and help us understand this. Now, a couple people before me have already asked some of the questions that I wanted to ask, like how would your office go about choosing a college, which I know that is not a decision that anyone could feasibly make on their own. My question now lands to where if, God forbid, we had to close a community college or a university, what would happen to the students who say, I know you'd have to close them in 2 years, who are used, like myself and a couple students here I know, use community college as a stepping stone to a 4-year university? What happens to the students who come in here in 1 year, start the year program to get the 2-year degree to go on to a 4-year degree, but then the college has to close until then? Or what happens to the students at the 4-year college who are there on scholarships 4 to 4 years, and the college has to close prematurely before that? I'm just curious as to if your office will have a plan like the lady from the criminal justice program. They click a button on the banner and they can transfer all of their stuff to the next available college with the classes they need to complete that degree. If your office will have something like that in place by the time, God forbid, we actually do have to close the university. Hopefully we won't, but that's just my concern.
If we had to go down that path, we would definitely have a plan. And you couldn't, first of all, the point I keep trying to make to people too, even if you wanted to do it at the legislature, you can't do it overnight because you have those concerns that you just expressed. What happens to the students that are currently in a program? What do you do to this, to the other students? Where do the other students go? What do you do? First of all, if there was a will to close an institution, I would bet it would be to close it forever.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, you're very optimistic saying maybe for 2 years. I think if there was a will to do that, that it would be gone forever.
Well, yeah, that's what I was saying. Like, I know it wasn't like to close it for 2 years. I know if you were to close an institution, it would be indefinitely. But I was just kind of curious as when that, I know you mentioned that in like the next 2 years, we got to cut X amount. If that would happen, if we were to close it, it would happen in 2 years. Like how?
See, and the other thing is that, first of all, it quite honestly makes me sort of ill to think about even having that conversation, right? The only reason I bring it up in these town halls is because I don't want people to think that we're trying to advance easy solutions, right? An easy solution on paper would be to close an institution. But what I'm trying to get people to understand is that doesn't make the rest of the system or the rest of the institutions more sustainable. So it's a quick fix, which impacts students and those who work here most dramatically. So that's not what I am proposing. And I'm going to continue to work with folks in the legislature to have them understand what the impact would be of doing that. So I do not want to be in a position of having to make those decisions, which is why I didn't propose it as part of my strategy. I looked at it because for me, everything needs to be on the table. I need to think about everything. And then I take things off the table, and that was the first thing to come off.
Yeah. And
Thank you.
I understand. No one wants to be in that position to actually close a college. So I understand we're going to take everything we can before that has to come. I'm just curious. Thank you.
No, and thank you.
Good morning, President Ojakian. My name is John Schaefer. I'm a faculty in the Center for New Media. I'm also currently serving as chair of the college's academic assembly. First, I would just like to acknowledge that I think I'm not alone in saying that a lot of us have mixed feelings about the proposals that you are implementing. On the one hand, I think many of us recognize the need for it. We also recognize that there could be some great advantages to students to have streamlined, integrated administrative services. For example, I work with students all the time who appreciate, or who I think who would appreciate being able to say, apply at only one community college, but be able to move around to the different institutions and not have to reapply to everything separately. That would be a great advantage for students because they are constantly moving around. I don't think they recognize the barrier of individual community colleges and their individual identities as much as we do. So that would be one advantage. The concern, I think, the deepest concern that I have, and I think is shared by many of us, that's partially been addressed, has to do with the way that we might lose our ability to adapt and make changes that immediately respond to students and the communities around us. And I'd like to use as an example something that we have integrated recently as a system, and that is the transfer articulation policy, the TAP. What I have seen, and I should mention that I was involved throughout the process. I was on the original steering committee. I've been on pathway committees. I'm currently coordinating 2 different pathways. And what I've seen in that example is that we put a great deal of effort into creating the system, and it's an integrated system that involves all the institutions in the CSU, CCSU system, whatever the...
CSCU. CSCU,
right.
I mix it up too.
It gets a little confusing, you're right. To create the system. What seems to be missing, or what at least is not clear to me, is how we make changes from here on out. In other words, we've created pathways, but there doesn't seem to be a process by which we as program coordinators or faculty can implement possible changes that need to be made. Now, maybe there's something there that I don't know about, but what I see is each of us as individuals are making changes, but it's really a system-based program, and there's no real process for which we can make adaptations, make changes easily on a system level. So my concern is as we create more systems like this that integrate all of the colleges, how are we going to develop processes by which we can make easy adapting changes to the various needs that we have on an individual basis that are responsive and communicating to the system level?
Well, let's talk about TAP for a minute first. And I think, the fact that we are going to continue to have the services of Ken and Candace for a while, I would imagine that not only would we continue to bring new programs into the TAP program, but there would be ways where there could be modifications made, and I'll definitely bring that to their attention, because it's the intention that if you have an integrated service, and you brought TAP as one that was faculty-driven, faculty-led, and there's a reason that we're putting these planning teams in place in those functional areas that we are looking to integrate, and that is to get the experience and the knowledge of the people that are actually doing the work to be part of that process. And we have, I think, all of the core teams have been established now, and we respected the rights of elected representatives of each of the constituencies to make those selections. And so we will be hopefully publishing those names soon. If folks want to be part of the process, we're asking people to either give your names today or email me directly. And by the way, I get a lot of emails or questions or comments from people who are not comfortable speaking in this venue, so feel free to email me directly. I do respond. But that's the reason that we're doing that, because we want to make sure that we can find an approach that is system-wide, but doesn't disadvantage the ability of an institution to be flexible when they need to be flexible and adapt to a specific situation. So that's the goal. So hopefully we can get to the goal. I think it's worth having the conversation and having the process, because if we get to a certain point in a certain area, somebody says the group says this makes absolutely no sense, then we won't do it. I change my mind depending on the information that comes to me. And I think people have heard me say this before, I don't have all the answers. That's why I have talented people at campuses to be part of the process. So thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, Dan Gould. You just addressed my question, so it's more of a comment now, but I'm a first-generation TAP student, and before I joined the program last semester, my academic career was all over the place, in jeopardy several times. This program has been a lifesaver for me. Dean's List 2 semesters in a row. Thank you. So, my concern is it was put together by faculty and staff here with local ties in mind, and it's a very local thing. So my comment and concern is how's that going to look afterwards, and how do you keep the creativity when it's no longer here but centralized in more of a broad way?
Well, I think if you take a look at the TAP initiative, I mean that really has been an example. Not only the TAP initiative but the library system. I know where all the library systems came together as one, and I know there's been some challenges with that, but you have to work through the challenges. So the goal is not to lose the creativity. I think during the TAP process there was creativity that came through, and people adapted depending on what that looked like. So we're not trying to stifle creativity. We're just trying to find a way that in 17 institutions we can do things as a system that makes sense. My favorite one, still to my last town hall, but my favorite one is still purchasing. I know I've been beating this drum, but there's no reason to me that we need to have 17 institutions purchasing their goods and services separately. There's no reason to me that we need to have 16 institutions purchasing or procuring their food service separately. Why can't we do one RFP for food service, differentiate between residential and non-residential? I'm sure we could get a vendor that would come in and provide us with that service at much less of a cost than we're paying for 16 separate agreements. You know, it's the same thing in IT. People talk about IT. We have so many licenses, software licenses across the system. Some conflict with others and some are redundant. So we need to take a look at these things to make sure that we are achieving economies of scale. It's not about control. In this strategy, my system office shrinks. We're not getting bigger. We're going to shrink by at least 13 to 15%. So we need to make some hard decisions. But we need to make sure that we have the right people in the planning process to help shape those decisions. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
And good luck.
Thank you.
Hi, Mr. Ojakian. Thank you for being here. My name is Steve Kravisky in the math department, and I'm also a member of the 4Cs Union Executive Board. We've met before. I got Hartford and other places. By the way, the stickers that you're seeing today are courtesy of the union, and I think you're seeing with this attendance here how much people care about this system, and with all the talent in this room, I hope that you'll take heed of that. I would like to take this discussion in a very different direction. I think many people are concerned about what seems to be a lack of transparency about these strategies because there wasn't a lot of public debate about it, and I know there's these teams involved with implementation that we've been talking about, but it seems to me there should have been public debate about this because, as you all know, it's getting to the end of the academic year and people can be dispersed over the summer. Some people have viewed this as a corporate model which concerns this, and some of you know Mary Ann Cox, who's on the Board of Trustees, whom we, of course, previously negotiated with. I also need to say there's another way to handle this. In President Wasatch's home state of Minnesota, they did make efforts to tax the wealthy and rich in corporations, many of whom don't pay taxes. I would urge my colleagues in the legislature to consider that revenue source. I know you said at the Norwalk Town Hall that you're not involved in that end of things, but you were in the CBAC negotiations in 11, which were not kind to our newer members. And for a lot of you who may not know, the CBAC is the State Employees Bargaining Coalition. And we're not terribly happy about having to make concessions when related to what Dean Minkler said before. We've given 3 times in 10 years, and it seems to me very inhumane to think about the Governor Malloy, whom you previously worked with, threatening to lay people off, closing colleges. I think something's very wrong with that, and I think we need to find another way to deal with that. In President Wasatch's home state of Minnesota, they were agreeable to taxing the wealthy and investing more in public education, as opposed to other states where there was union busting, like in Wisconsin. And this idea of making us pay for a problem we didn't cause is, to me, very unacceptable, and I think a lot of other people feel that way. So I would urge everybody to sort of rethink this, that we need to think about other ways of handling this. And another facet regarding to what the students have very nicely said today, if people get moved around, like with all of the talented people in this room, is it students first to make people move around, go to other campuses where they don't know the campus culture the way we know our culture here? And if you lay off people, if you close programs that students need, that's not students first. So I think what we need to think about is there needs to be another way to handle this as opposed to what we're seeing now.
Well, I don't know where to start. So let me talk about things that I have control over. All right, then let's put the discussion about revenue and unions, and because if we want to talk about 2011, I think the leaders and I came together to come up with an agreement that everybody thought was fair at the time. So you may not think it was fair to newer members or older members. It was, a long, hot summer, talking about summer, and some days, 24 hours a day, sitting and negotiating that in good faith. Because as somebody who had to negotiate it for the governor, I knew that if we didn't come to an agreement, workers would lose their jobs. So for me, that's what kept me up all night long. So I'm not involved in what's going on now. I have my own personal opinions, but I keep those to myself. So let's talk about, the difference between a strategy and a plan, because I think it's important to understand. Had I wanted to, I am the president, after all, I could have come up with a plan that was all signed, sealed, and delivered, and said to folks, here you go, this is what we're doing. It's not the way that I particularly operate. I think people that have known me and worked with me long enough know that's not my style. But somebody had to start the conversation. And knowing last year that we were going to have probably an issue into the future, we assembled the work groups, which worked very hard. We assembled them last summer. They worked over the summer. They came up with some recommendations, and some of those will be the beginning of this process. But savings was only $5 million over 2 years. It's not enough. So we have to go back. So I needed to start the conversation. So the conversation was about 2 strategies, not a plan, and savings targets. Targets. We don't hit the targets, we don't hit the targets. This is an iterative process that the planning teams will take the strategies and try to move them forward. I could not afford, as a leader, just to sit back and say, all right, now we're going to have 17 town halls to talk about what we might want to think about doing. Because we would be, next fall, then talking about maybe having 1 or 2 strategies and how we were going to get there. And I thought it was much more important to start the conversation, which is what this is, with 2 strategies, and say, let's put together teams to help us get there in a very timely fashion. Now, people who have signed up to be on the implementation teams understood that we would have to work in the summer because we don't have the luxury of just waiting. So I think that even though there's been some criticism about putting out the strategies, I think it was the responsible thing to do to start the conversation. Because we wouldn't be having this conversation now if I had not done that. So I understand, your point, and I hope that you can, respect my point that the process will continue. The strategies will at some point become a plan. It may all be encompassed in a plan. It may not all be encompassed in a plan. That's why we're putting these groups together to help us get there. But I do not regret starting the conversation.
Could you also further comment before we move on about spending at the Board of Regents level, because there were issues before you became president with people like President Gray and other people who caused a lot of difficulties, and when the Boston Consulting Group came in, that caused a lot. That was a lot of money spent, and some of us have questioned for what.
No, listen, I was in a different seat then, and to be quite candid, I cautioned my predecessor not to do that. But the governor's office doesn't control the Board of Regents or the Board at UConn, and so. it worked out poorly. I knew it was going to work out poorly. I could just see the writing on the wall. There was a reason that when I came in, we decided to go from 2 buildings to 1, because I was very aware of how much we spent at the system office. There was a reason that I canceled raises that were due to management confidential folks when I came in. And when we're talking about management confidential, we're not just talking about people like me. We're talking about, for example, administrative assistants who don't make as much money, okay? And so that was a very difficult decision to do, doing hiring freezes, watching every dollar that we spent, making it a priority to lead by example and reduce the system office staff as well. So I am very cognizant. I didn't even replace, when I first walked into the office, there were 3 chairs sitting there in the first office I had, because I moved to a smaller office, right? Because I like to lead by example. There were these 3 chairs sitting up by this table that I don't think had been cleaned or used in about 40 years. I don't know where they came from. And somebody said, they brought me all these fabric samples. I said, are you kidding me? I'm not going to have the first thing I do here have these chairs replaced. We'll sit somewhere else or move the chairs out of here. I don't need them. I'm very cognizant of the money we spend.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. Hi.
Hi, good morning. My name is Kristen Inglis. I'm the academic manager for the Wesleyan Center for Prison Education.
I recognize you.
We met at the legislative breakfast
We did.
back in January. So you know the basic contours of the program. It's been a great success so far. We're going to be having 6 students graduate at the end of the semester, and then an additional 15 to 20 this time next year. So we've been really pleased with the partnership so far. The partnership really relied on a shared vision between Wesleyan and Middlesex about what a good college and prison program should look like. And the shared vision was one that involved the highest caliber liberal arts education possible, one that favors quality over quantity. Mm-hmm. And that's something that you see in a number of different ways in how we run our program. My concern is that with more centralized management, the kind of shared philosophy that made our partnership possible would be more difficult to achieve because the administrators are further away from the community partner. I also have more technical concerns. So as part of our partnership, we are an educational consortium. There are a number of both financial and non-financial arrangements that we have in place that were set up to serve the interests of both institutions. And Kim Hogan in finance and Irene Martin in financial aid have done an incredible amount of legwork to make these moving parts work. And my worry is that if we're moving the administration to a central level, that there will be less willingness to do that legwork and to steward the various moving parts of our program. And in that case, I worry about whether Wesleyan will be eager to maintain a partnership. I do think losing the partnership would be a real loss. These kinds of private-public partnerships are very rare. Certainly, this is the only private-public partnership for college and prison in the state of Connecticut, and it's just one of a handful nationwide. And I think that there is a financial sustainability argument for these kinds of public-private partnerships as well. As state funding for higher education goes down, it's important for public colleges, and especially the community colleges, to have relationships with private institutions. And yet, I think for those public-private partnerships to work, you want those public partners to be small enough to be able to do creative, innovative things. So I guess I'm wondering whether you think these kinds of public-private partnerships can thrive in a situation that has more centralized management?
Absolutely, and I think they have to thrive. I just actually recently facilitated one of those partnerships we're going to be announcing soon between Trinity College and Capital Community College. So I know exactly not only the importance, but the value of the program that you provide with this institution, and the intention of the sort of consolidation discussion is to not lose those kinds of partnerships, so find a way to enhance those kinds of partnerships. I mean, we can't do everything anymore, right? So we can't do everything anymore. So we have to prioritize what we do, and to me, that's a very high priority. Not only because it's a public-private partnership. I recently just co-chaired the Higher Education Working Group with President Berger Sweeney from Trinity. All public and private institution presidents in the same room talking about entrepreneurship. The first time that there's ever been an assembly of those presidents ever that anybody could remember. And what we're going to be doing is giving out grant funding based on public-private partnerships, not only between public and private institutions, but 2- and 4-year institutions. And your program specifically, I've been not only touting yours, but what we do with our Second Chance Pell money, for example, at Asnuntuck. I recently went we had a town hall for students up at the Capitol, and one of the manufacturing students from Asnuntuck had just recently gotten out of prison. So I'm looking for ways to not only sustain but enhance those programs. And so as we move the discussion along, that's going to be one of the priorities in my mind.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Jim Probolis, and I'm a member of the Middlesex Community College Foundation Board. And I want to put this in a little different direction. I want to start a little higher up and basically say, this is a systemic and major problem that we all know faces the state. This strategy, if you will, is part of, I'll say, what I assume is many other leaders getting together and figure out how to address the problems that we're in. I'm sort of reminded of the cartoon where the physicians are standing around the operating room looking at the patient and saying, good news, bad news, we've cured the illness, but the patient died. And here we're looking at the state of Connecticut as the patient. And you folks have a very difficult job. I fully recognize that and applaud you for your efforts. One of the things that confuses me is, what is the long-term outlook of this process? And in trying to, I'll say, take apart the strategy, I looked at, the states of Tennessee, New York, Oregon, Minnesota, Kentucky, and also the city of San Francisco, and even former President Obama, who said, we need to make community college education free and accessible for everyone. And this strategy, I feel, is taking the opposite direction and leading us down the wrong path. And I'm just curious, try to make it a simple question, have you looked at those states and found out how was it that they were able, this is a very diverse group of states, able to structure something that they are able to put together a plan that makes that access to education affordable for their residents?
Money. I mean, pure and simple. You look at some of the systems across the country. Now, we've looked at systems in parts of the country that have moved in the direction we're looking to move in, and we're learning lessons. We're not replicating models, but I like to look at what other folks have tried and where they've succeeded and not. But there was an active commitment to provide the funding necessary to make that education either free or much more affordable. I think in many of those states they didn't have sort of the recession hit and never recover, and so you've seen a much better position financially for those states. The University of California system just recently had its first tuition increase in like 6 years. And it was for people making above, families making above a certain amount of money. But they also provide to the system $2.5 million each year to market the system to California residents. We have a very different problem here. And so it's not about, wishing, I wish things were different. But I'm faced with choices. I'm faced with difficult choices. And how do you preserve the, not only accessibility, but for all intents and purposes, affordable. If you take a look at around New England states, we're pretty affordable at our colleges. How do you maintain that for the students in a different model? Because I really believe that if we don't change and make things more sustainable, that every single year we're going to be back having the same discussion. And it's going to be, okay, so this year we got to cut you, Middlesex, by $3 million. And next year it's got to be $5 million. And at some point we're going to run out of, first of all, I think we're already running out of places to make cuts. Maybe the dean can, second that. But it really is a strategic effort to try to make sure that the students still have the high quality education at the same locations. That is the gut of this whole thing. And it would be irresponsible of me to think that we're going to have free anything anytime soon. So I need to take the task in front of me and make some realistic decisions about how should we look in the future, and how do we make the best use of the limited resources that we are going to have. And I really believe, people have criticized me, and you didn't, but I have to make the point, have questioned the motivation of students first. And they said, you really don't care about students first. It's just a tagline. And I responded, we can have a very productive conversation about direction, about strategies. We can disagree over certain parts of the strategies, some of the savings, the process. But my motivation, pure and simple, is the students that we all collectively serve. I have probably spent more time than most presidents in a system this size traveling to each of the institutions meeting with students. Students of color, transgender students, women students, Muslims, all sorts of students that we have. We have the most diverse population in our system. Having town halls, meeting with student leaders, encouraging people to vote during the last election. I've spent a great amount of time with all of our students. And if I didn't feel so invested in their futures, I wouldn't be doing this right now.
Okay, and just one more comment, and I'll give other folks a chance, but my hope is that you and your staff are actively preparing to put together a dream team that can create a management team that can take over this consolidation of administrative services, because there's 10 units out there that are functioning and doing their best to provide that high quality service at the least cost, and to have one individual or a small team of individuals capable of servicing them all at the same level is mission impossible.
Absolutely, and actually we've tasked Dr. Michael Rook of Northwestern to lead this effort, working with the other presidents and some deans. So we have people a lot smarter than I am, who know the nuts and bolts that are helping shape this as it moves along. So thank you for that.
Good morning, and thank you for being here this morning. My name is Dr. David Larson. I am the Executive Director Emeritus of the Connecticut Association of Public School Superintendents and the former superintendent schools here in Middletown. Also, my family are consumers, have been consumers of the CSU system. My son has a degree from here, And my other children all have degrees from the other 4 universities, so I'm pretty familiar with what happens here. A comment and a question. My comment is that this college is so important to the students and the well-being of Middlesex County, not only on an educational side, but also on an economic side. My question to you, and I understand the need to make cuts. I look at the state budget as a superintendent. I've had to close schools, so I understand that. I have a question on process, and maybe you've answered it, but my understanding is that this whole process just started at your central office without bringing in your college presidents to sit at the table and to get their ideas to begin this process. I may be wrong on that, but I'd ask you to comment on that.
We had conversations with the presidents, but you have to remember, though, is that these are strategies. They're not finished products. And listen, I've been talking for a very, very long time about the need to make change. And I've asked anybody who would listen to provide me with some creative ideas on how we could get there. From presidents to staff to faculty members, everywhere I go, and I've spoken to groups, I've said, listen, we have to change our model. Help us get there. Give me something to work with. And at the end of the day, you have to make some decisions and you have to move something forward. And I wish there had been more offered, but I had to do what I thought was the responsible thing to do. The other thing that we're doing, and I'm glad you brought up the superintendents, because we've been talking to superintendents and guidance counselors, because I found that there was, in certain places, somewhat of a disconnect between how our system and how our institutions were being perceived and marketed in the K-12 system. When you actively discourage people from attending a community college, are you doing your student body a service or a disservice?
Disservice, obviously.
Right? And so there had been, and there continues to be, because high schools are ranked according to some artificial ranking of where your students go to school. And not only community colleges, but also our 4 CSUs were not being properly, students were not being properly advised of the opportunities that could await them at these institutions. So we've been trying to do a lot to get in to talk to guidance counselors, to talk to superintendents, to talk to regional school districts, to try to change that dynamic. Because it's not only about, as I've said before, not only about cutting and making a more sustainable model, but it's about bringing more revenue into the system. I've met with students who started going to a 4-year institution and it just wasn't for them. And they went to the 4-year institution because their guidance counselor said, oh, you don't want to go to one of those community colleges. Now they're thriving at a community college. So, we're doing our best.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
I think, if I may, I'll inject myself for a moment as timekeeper. Good news is that we can conclude all of the people who are in line to ask a question, but we do have a time ending of about 11 o'clock due to President Ojakian's schedule. But if you haven't had a chance to ask a question, please take an opportunity to write it on one of the cards or a piece of paper, and you could leave it with Professor Wallace on your way out. But we can finish up with these
Email me
folks.
directly.
Hi, my name is Hannah Pulicard, and I'm a student here at Middlesex. One of the things that I like about Middlesex is that the faculty and staff are very often easily available. If President Wasecha or one of the deans are in a meeting, you can just pop into their office and ask them a question. So if consolidation were to go through, how would that be affected? Because I really like that I can just ask one of my teachers, hey, I need some help. Can you meet with me later today at a certain time? And it can happen. So I'm just wondering, how would the consolidation affect the faculty and staff?
Well, first of all, the consolidation is not, first of all, not meant to affect faculty at all. And the whole reason to do this is to make sure that you still have those same opportunities on the campus. And so as we move this forward, we're going to make sure that the support services and the interaction one-on-one that you need remains at the institution. But given the fact that we have this structural deficit and unsustainable system, we have to make some choices about how we're going to look as a model. But foremost in my mind is to make sure that you're not disadvantaged at all. As a matter of fact, in a model that I had before we had this other deficit sneak up on us, recently, there would become a point in time over the next few years where our revenue would actually be higher than our expenses. And I've said all along that my preference for those additional resources was to go back into the campuses, into not only full-time tenure-track faculty where they're needed, and full-time tenure-track faculty that actually look more like the students we serve, but also in student service areas. As I've traveled around, the thing that I've noticed is that everybody is working so incredibly hard and wearing so many hats, right? I met a young woman the other day. She's financial aid director, veterans benefit. She's got like 4 things to do, and spends half of her time processing, right? Administrative processing. So isn't there a better way to do that, to free up her time to be able to interact more directly with you, or to provide at some point in the future more folks to actually, maybe we have 1 financial aid director and 1 person that coordinates veteran benefits? I think there is.
All right, thank you.
No, thank you. Hi.
Good morning. I'm Christine Witkowski. I'm a professor here at Middlesex. And one of the first things that President Wasesha did after arriving at Middlesex 6 years ago now was to sign the American College and University President's Climate Commitment. And we're one of, I believe, only 2 community colleges in Connecticut who have signed that and have a climate action plan. I know the state universities do as well, but of the community colleges, I believe we're one of only 2. And as part of that commitment, we developed a climate action plan. We've worked with community partners and Wesleyan very closely to begin to achieve the goals in our climate action plan. So we've done a tremendous amount. It enhances the student experience. It makes us leaders in the community in terms of sustainability and climate. And the success of our efforts is very much due to the leadership that we've had on campus, starting with President Wasesha, also Dean Hogan, who has worked very closely with us to make sure that everything we do on campus is consistent with that climate action plan. And I'm very concerned about what the future holds for this under the possible consolidation. How does that play out? Given that only 2 community colleges are active in this area, and that so much of the leadership and vision on campus has made that possible. So I wonder what that might look like in the future.
Well, first of all, maybe we should be replicating the climate change plan on other campuses.
Yes.
I mean, that's number 1. And number 2, listen, I can't tell you exactly what things are going to look like in the future. I mean, I wish I could. And if I had a plan, I could. But I want to get the best and the brightest folks that we have in the system, we have a lot of them, to be helpful to make sure that we're able to meet our financial challenges and to make our system more sustainable and resilient in the future, and actually enhance those kinds of partnerships and those kinds of programs that you have. Maybe we can't do it all. So I'm not going to stand there and make a commitment that we're going to continue to do every single thing, but something like you just mentioned sounds like it, as I said earlier, should be replicated in other places. So, I mean, stay tuned, and I'm sorry for that answer, but I don't have exactly how it's going to look in the end. That's why we have a team together of community college presidents and deans trying to be helpful and working with our accrediting body to make sure that what we do makes sense, doesn't impact those kinds of programs that you're just talking about, and will put us on a path so that we don't have to continue to have these discussions long into the future. So thank you for your commitment.
Thank you.
Thank you. Hi.
Good morning, Dr. Ojakian. My name is...
It's President. I'm not a doctor. Somebody will quickly point that out.
Good morning, anyway.
Quickly will point it out. I don't want to go into...
My name is Julie Crawford, and I am the chair of the Foundation Board of Directors here at the Community College. I'm also a local attorney, and I've practiced in this community for over 30 years. And I am very proud to say I am an alumna of this university in 1979. Suzanne, a former student or current student, mentioned that she's a midlife career changer. In the 70s, we were called displaced homemakers.
That's right. I'm sorry.
I think I was displaced by my family of 3 children, who made it very difficult for me to travel the state to receive various courses and electives that I received here at this community college. So as you know, we are so geographically based. We go from the shoreline in Old Saybrook up to Rocky Hill, over to Wallingford and Meriden. Now, you will see here in this audience dedicated members of our foundation who have taken time out of their day, some of which is a work day, busy days, to hear what you have to say. And I am very concerned about 2 things as the chair. One, is there a value judgment being placed on the community college system by virtue of the size of our cuts versus the other cuts? And 2, how are we as a foundation to continue our task as putting students first in the form of financial support, scholarships, which we give to 21 high school students to come here, and so many other colleges? How do we reconcile that with our ambassadorship to say consolidation does not mean giving up community? Thank
So
you.
let me answer the second part first, because I recently sent out a communication to all foundation board heads, and I hope you received it.
I did not.
Okay. I will make sure. Can you make sure that, because it went to everybody who we had on the list, and it basically reassured people that, you know, foundations were not going to be impacted at all by this conversation, that the dollars that were raised for the institution would continue to be raised and put to use at this institution. We weren't looking to centralize foundations into one foundation, and then we would decide where the money was going to go. So foundations would still have a very active role and would be very much community-based. Value judgment. If I was to make a value judgment, and a real value judgment, the value judgment I made was to try to find a way to keep a very fragile community college system financially afloat without closing an institution. That's the value judgment I made. Because as I said earlier, I do not have the luxury of taking money from the university system or Charter Oak and putting it into the community colleges. I get a block grant. And when you get the block grant, then you distribute the money you have accordingly. So while many have talked about that the discussion of these strategies is an attempt to obliterate community college education in the state. I'm not saying you said that. I get a lot of emails. I get a lot of emails from people that remember the glory days. And I get the glory days. I wish we had the glory days, but we don't. And so if I really didn't think that there was value in what community colleges did, or value in the students that they served, what I would have done is just sat back, either passed on the cuts for the next 2 or 3 years, or proposed closing an institution. There's not a magic bullet here, and I wish I had one. But in order to keep the same locations and the quality and the students here, we have to do something different. You know, we fought really hard to get changes to this Roberta Willis State Scholarship Financial Aid Program so it could actually be used by part-time students. Because our community colleges are being negatively impacted because of the numbers of part-time students that we had. There was a reason we worked really hard with the Commissioner of Transportation to come up with a transportation fee, $20 a semester for students so they could take the bus or the train 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 12 months a year. Those are the value judgments that I made because I know how important these institutions are. But I think I would really be derelict in my duty if I didn't try to explore a different organizational model to keep everybody afloat.
One last.
Sure.
Is there any interest in having a foundation task force in which a number of foundations could join together and give ideas and implement them along the way in the very near future?
Sure, absolutely. I mean, we had one conversation early on we invited all foundation leaders to a meeting that I hosted to try to start the conversation about how do we share best practices, how do we maybe pull some of the things that we're doing. You know, that I don't believe that's progressed beyond that because all of a sudden we were hit with this budget, but that's something that we will definitely try to reconvene. And then maybe it's up to maybe the foundations then have the conversations on their own. You were at that first meeting we had, right?
We have been thinking about
Okay.
the other foundations.
Absolutely. Okay, well, when I get back to the office, I get the notes of the day, and so that's one of the things I'll
Thank
do.
you very
Thank you
much.
very much.
Good morning again. Thank you for being here. I'd like to thank the audience for being here. Great turnout and a good diversity group. I graduated here a long time ago, 1971. Been a friend of the college for years, currently on the advisory board. My question to you is, where are the businesses getting involved with the college system, both at the community level and at the university level? For example, the aerospace component manufacturers employ roughly 50,000 people in the state of Connecticut. That's not just in manufacturing, but in the supply base, from material handlers to how they process. How do we get them involved into the system? Because A, they have knowledge, B, they have a lot of information on what's coming, and they can provide help and assistance to the community and the university system.
And you know, rest assured we are having those conversations with at least the major employers in the aerospace industry. I can't wait, you know, this is my last meeting, but I need to get back to work, okay? And I need to get back to having those kinds of conversations. We've started with Pratt & Whitney and Sikorsky and Electric Boat. They recognize that we are, you know, the future pipeline for their workers, and we've adapted our curriculum at our institutions to meet their needs. Now it's time for them to put some skin in the game. You know, we have a manufacturing program, as you know, where we don't charge what it costs, right? It costs about $16,000 for somebody to go through a 10-month certificate program, and we charge $8,000. And we charge $8,000 for a reason, right? Because of not only Pell Grants, but other support. And we don't want to price the students who take advantage of that program out of the program. So we need some help. And the reason we can't expand the manufacturing program, we have capacity at our manufacturing centers, but we can't afford more students. So we're working to try to find out, is there a better way to tap into some of the Labor Department money that's out there, or the DECD money? We have these conversations all the time. So once I get back, you know, and start actually going back out to meet with these businesses, we'll have a better sense. But those conversations have already started.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Hi.
You're the last town hall question.
out of 17, right?
I did all 17 in about 14 days.
One of my question will be about that being last, comment. Oh, my name is Patty Vassy. I'm a corporator of the college and have been around as long as the college. Comment.
That's a good thing, though.
Beats the alternative.
Right.
I challenge, this may not be popular in the room, but I challenge your supposition of don't close anything. You know, we're going to maintain it all. Because by certain cuts, we can have a slow death that would compromise the very thing that I think is our strength, and that is our administrative ability to bring the student to that faculty that you don't want to cut. And the uniqueness here is the sense of community, the financial aid, how we promote students to come here and what we do once they arrive. We heard from some of those students that had that personal attention, because this is not somebody graduating from college going on to Yale that can do it all online. There's some hand-holding that needs to be done to engage these students, the diversity of these students. And please don't kill us slowly. I guess, and I don't mean just for Middlesex, but I mean across the system, that we don't do something to save money and will diminish the amount of students that come, and in the long term will put us out of business. That's my comment. That it has a fundraising effect as well. And our foundation is just starting to get on its roll to doing what it's supposed to be doing. And doing what I just said will also affect our ability to generate more money to help support the college. The question I have for you, thank you for being here. Thank you for 17 visits that you have done for town halls. You're a very bright gentleman. You've got a lot of input. What have you seen as the common threads from all of us that you will want to mull over with your staff team and the leadership here? What have you heard that is common to all of us? Because we are a system. Thank you.
No, and thank you. I think what I heard, I expected. The passion for the institutions, the passion for the students, I think the recognition in most places that we do have to deal with some serious issues, and that we should hopefully try to do them together. You know, everybody is so eager to point out all of the positive impacts that these institutions have had on the students. You know, I'm a huge cheerleader in spite of the fact that I have to make some tough decisions. And if you ask the university folks, they'll tell you that all I do is lobby, they think, on behalf of the colleges. Because sometimes the cuts for the colleges are less at the Capitol than for the universities. But I think what I want to leave people with is that the goal here is to try, right? You don't know till you try, as my mother always tells me, is to try to come up with a solution that doesn't do what you suggested in your comment, which is to kill the system by a death of 1,000 cuts, okay? And I think, as I've heard from many people, both at the town halls and then who communicate with me directly afterwards, I've heard a willingness to at least try to come up with a model that doesn't do that in the end. That we can use all of our collective talents, and there's much brighter people in this room than I am. I mean, I always know I'm not the brightest person in the room. To use all the collective talents of all of the folks that we have in the system to come up with a model that will allow us, A, not to close an institution, and that might be inevitable down the road. I don't have a crystal ball. But to come up, excuse me, with a system where we can, at some point in time, invest more in student success and to look creatively around 17 institutions and say, is there an approach that we can use in certain areas to really be a system? And there might be, there might not be. But there's been a lot of resistance to change. You know, change is very hard. Most people want to see change as long as it doesn't impact them, right? You know, Comcast just recently sent me out a new channel guide, and I just was really upset because now I'm going to have to learn new channels. I mean, but it's hard. It's hard. But I think we have, as I look around this room and as I think back to the other 16, we have the talent to try to find a new way to provide the best education we can to our students. You know, some of our students, in fact, go to Ivy League schools. And some of our students take a 10-month certificate program and have a successful job in a manufacturing center, making $60,000 or $70,000 to start. You know, we're about providing opportunities. And if we don't think differently and try to come up with a different solution than just cutting budgets, then the opportunity that they expect and deserve is not going to be there. And I don't want that to happen, not only on my watch, but also once I'm sitting on a beach chair somewhere, you know, sipping a margarita when I finally do retire from public service. I don't want that to be the future of the students. You know, we showcase our students all the time. And you may not know this, but the Appropriations Committee last year decided that they had heard enough from us talking about why everything's so important. They wanted to hear from the students. And we brought the students up to the Capitol, and they sat on panels, both last year and this year, in front of the Appropriations Committee. And it was the most, not only effective testimony that legislators heard, it really made me proud to be a part of the system. And it should make all of you proud for all of the great work that you do here to make sure that those students continue to succeed. So, you know, as I leave this last town hall, I just want people to know that my heart's in the right place, that I'm going to do my best, because I really do believe in the students first mantra. So it's been a pleasure. Thank you very much, and we'll continue to talk.